Doesn't matter, honestly, what I think. Gotta leave my ego aside, I guess. Definitely frustrated the way I've been treated around, I guess.
Dubinsky has kind of turned around his opinion on Tortorella towards your tactics are getting old. I have a hot take here. I actually am on John Tortorella's side. Hello guys, and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about John Tortorella and all the insanity over the past 24 hours. After the healthy scratch of Sean Couturier, we've seen Couturier, Brandon Dubinsky, and Couturier's agent all going after Tortorella. So how did Couturier, his agent, and Dubinsky actually respond to Tortorella's antics? How bad is this for the future of Torts and Couturier's relationship? And who's in the right here, John Tortorella or Sean Couturier's camp? Well, we're going to be giving you all the details here so you guys can make up your own mind, as well as I'm going to talk about my thoughts here. And of course, make sure you watch till the end for all that. And hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this every weekday all throughout the year. Now, if you haven't seen it already, it was announced pretty well before the Leafs versus Flyers game that Sean Couturier would be healthy scratch for the first time in his whole career. And this was humongous news. Obviously, the caliber of player that Sean Couturier is, how much he means to this Flyers franchise, and the fact that he was named captain of the Flyers 34 days ago. He survived about a month at a chunk of change before being healthy scratched. And I think for a lot of people it was also confusing, especially considering the fact that in the first half, Couturier was getting a lot of buzz for rejuvenating his career. After missing about a year and a half of NHL action, in his first 26 games back with Philly, he had 7 goals, 14 assists for 21 points, and was a pretty major reason for the Flyers' great start. But the drop-off in Couturier's game hasn't been nearly as documented, and you can see over the past 23 games, he has 1 goal, 5 assists for 6 points, a -18, and just the counting stats aren't too pretty. And you can already see in this stretch his ice time starting to dwindle. You got 12 minutes of ice time versus the Leafs in February, and another 12 minutes against the Lightning, then 12 minutes against the Blues. Then in his last game versus Boston, he would be down to 11 minutes and 10 seconds of time on ice. And you consider what he was averaging before this stretch, basically 20 minutes of time on ice, it was a pretty big downgrade. But it was becoming increasingly obvious that Torts and the Flyers weren't seeing Sean Couturier as this important piece over this stretch, continuing to dwindle his ice time until they just went for it and healthy scratched him in the end. Now, Sean Couturier had a pretty lengthy response to the healthy scratch to Tortorella, and it was pretty disheartening to see. You can see just how much this has meant to him, this team has meant to him, and being on the sidelines, this video really hurts to watch.
Doesn't matter, honestly, what I think. Gotta leave my ego aside, I guess. I feel I've been putting the work in for a while. I know I've been struggling, trying to work on my game. Definitely frustrated the way I've been treated around, I guess, but lately. But I guess we're going on, with the best lineup available tonight to get a win. So it is what it is.
And to make matters worse as well, Sean Couturier's agent basically just went to The Athletic and basically tore John Tortorella to shreds. Now we're going to get into what his agent said in a second, but first let's talk about today's sponsor in Sleeper Fantasy. Of course, if you guys don't know already, Sleeper is the best place to turn your hockey knowledge into big paydays, making daily NHL picks, just picking more or less on the players throughout every day in NHL action. And today I got 5 different picks here today, $10 to win 136. First, I got Logan Cooley, more than 1.5 shots on goal. He's hit this in each of his last 4 games, and he's been really trying to score some goals lately, and even in the goal scoring department, he's been pretty good too over his last 2 games. I also got Kirill Kaprizov, more than 0.5 points. This is pretty much a gimme. Even though it doesn't provide too much value, still it's a pretty good, easy one to make. Then I got Wyatt Johnston, more than 0.5 points. He's also hit this in 4 of his last 4 games. Also Dylan Guenther, more than 2.5 shots on goal. He's also hit this. Another player just like Cooley that's really been rolling for Arizona as of late. And then I got Pierre-Luc Dubois, actually more than 0.5 points. He's been really secretly good for LA over, I guess, the past week or so. Now, we'll see if that continues, but Dubois is on a little bit of a heater, so we're going to go for that. And of course, if you guys want to make your own NHL and sports picks every day, make sure you go in the description, click on the link, and set it to Sleeper Fantasy, and use promo code GRAV on your first deposit, and you'll get up to a $500 match. If you put $100 in, you'll get 100 free bucks with Sleeper. So thank you to Sleeper Fantasy for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get into this article because it's quite fascinating here. The headline being Sean Couturier's agent calls out Flyers' lack of communication and John Tortorella communication after the captain was scratched. Now, what really hasn't been talked about too much in this whole situation has been the lack of communication between Torts and Couturier's camp, and Kevin Kerr says this about it, saying the most puzzling aspect of Couturier's scratching is that he hasn't heard much about it from Tortorella, who, as made clear by general manager Daniel Briere, was the sole decision maker. Couturier said he has only spoken with the coach somewhat about it. And according to Couturier's agent, communication between the coach and captain has been less than ideal for some time now. As of Tuesday afternoon, Eric Lupien hadn't spoken with his client about getting pulled from the lineup, but he did speak with him several days ago when Couturier's ice time had already been trending downward. Couturier was averaging about 20 minutes on January 13th. Now he's about 16-10 per game since. Then he goes on to say Couturier was puzzled by his diminished role even before Tuesday's scratching. He was clueless about his ice time. Why his ice time went down, Lupien said. But he said, I'm just going to manage to play whatever he wants me to play. If it's 14 minutes, it's going to be 14 minutes. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Just as puzzling to Couturier, according to Lupien, is that the player had a good rapport with Tortorella since the coach's arrival in 2022. Even if Couturier wasn't healthy enough to play at the time, Tortorella being the driving force behind Couturier getting the captaincy at all, when he previously said no captain would be named this season, also speaks to that. He goes on to say, I hope he's going to get an explanation soon because he's the captain, a leader of the team, and he has Philadelphia tattooed on his chest since he got drafted. That's why he wanted to sign here and to sign a long-term contract. I hope he's going to get that respect from John Tortorella. So we learn a lot in this article, the fact that Couturier and Tortorella just haven't really spoken after this whole situation, which kind of feels counterproductive to me, especially on Tortorella's side. If you're trying to make this player learn a lesson, if you're trying to really drive a point home, I feel like having that communication and that openness with what you're trying to hammer home should be the biggest priority. If the player doesn't actually learn what he's supposed to from the situation, what was the point of doing it after all? The problem for me is that, and with the actual on-ice decision-making, with scratching Sean Couturier, I have a hot take here. I actually am on John Tortorella's side. I don't think it was the worst idea in the world to take a player aside and scratch them, and even in Sean Couturier's case, even if he's the captain, make an example. That's what John Tortorella has done throughout his entire coaching career. No matter who you are, no matter how much you get paid, you're going to sit if you deserve to be sit. But if we do take his agent at his word and there hasn't been the communication necessary there, to me, I think that's a mistake on Tortorella's side. Maybe Torts is assuming that Couturier is going to get the message and that's going to work out fine. And it absolutely could still work out that way. But to me, if I'm a coach and I'm making such an important decision, scratching a captain in the way that I did, to me, I'd make it as open as I possibly could and have the communication as openly as I could to make sure that he gets that message and that it's going to be okay. You don't want to have this type of situation linger and this situation become even worse and the communication between the two evaporates because it looks like it's already starting to happen that way. The last thing you'd want is the captain of your team being disgruntled with your coach being disgruntled with the franchise. And even though that's not something Tortorella can completely control, you can still have some control over that situation. Still try to make an effort to bring in some communication and make sure that he sees your side of things. And the fact that Torts hasn't really made an effort for that, to me, is something I disagree with. And then we get even more fuel on the fire with Brandon Dubinsky, a former player under John Tortorella with the Columbus Blue Jackets, chiming in a pretty major way. Now, it's pretty funny the change up from Dubinsky on John Tortorella all the way back in 2017, of course, when he was playing with him. He congratulated him for the Jack Adams. But then in 2021, when the Blue Jackets did not have a very good start, Dubinsky called him out saying, Blue Jackets having fun. Team is 6-12, not 12-6 with John Tortorella behind the bench. Players could lie to the media and say otherwise, but you could feel it. So we already know that it seems like Dubinsky has kind of turned around his opinion on Tortorella, but then we go on to this tweet from 8:25 a.m. in the morning, shredding him to pieces, saying, Torts, your tactics are getting old. Instead of scratching and embarrassing your captain, one of the best players, how about try and tell him I'm giving you 20 minutes tomorrow night, no matter what, with power play and PK, and go play free, have fun, and friggin' get it done. Now, in some ways, I can agree with what Dubinsky is saying here. In some ways, it's kind of just irrefutable. I mean, in terms of the actual tactics here, they worked out. The Flyers won against the Leafs 4-3, and not only did it work out, they played incredibly. The Flyers played so well that Sheldon Keefe said he didn't like anybody tonight. Forwards, defense, goaltending, didn't like anybody. The Flyers made Sheldon Keefe say that, and even though you could disagree with what Tortorella did here, it worked out, at least throughout the first game here. Now, it's so interesting to talk about John Tortorella because I think this Dubinsky tweet puts it perfectly, just how much of a difference people can have in what they want from a coaching staff, what they want and expect from a coach in the NHL. And to me, with Tortorella, it's interesting. Some of the decisions I agree with, some of them I think might go overboard, but I do appreciate the accountability that Tortorella puts within his systems, puts on his players. If you aren't playing up to a level and a standard that the Flyers should have, then you're not going to be playing. And here's the thing, is that I think a lot of people, again, feel like this came out of nowhere. But again, if you look at the ice time, it was already diminishing. And even with Couturier's diminishing ice time, it looks like Tort still didn't feel like Couturier got the message completely. And if a healthy scratch is what needs to happen to make that happen, then so be it. Now, do I agree with how Tortorella has gone about this? Not really having too much communication with Couturier, not as much, but you can see why he's done it and why the results afterwards came. The Flyers were probably a better team yesterday without Sean Couturier in the lineup. And even though that might be a little bit embarrassing, sometimes life could be a little bit embarrassing. Sometimes life needs to kick you in the butt so you can get better, and Tortorella is just showing the example of that. And to me, I really don't get the assumption that his tactics are old personally. I mean, there is probably a couple of coaches, Tortorella being among them, that could have this Flyers team, this roster, this culture in a playoff spot right now. This Flyers team was supposed to be garbage, down in the dumpster, but Tortorella has gotten the most out of them, and that's come from a lot of accountability, scratching Morgan Frost in the beginning of the year, having a player like Joel Verby sitting out for a long stretch in a game and learning his lesson afterwards. There's been a lot of accountability with this Flyers roster, and they have been better for it. And I think Sean Couturier will be better for it. Even though I don't agree with the lack of communication, it seems like Couturier has still gotten the message, and that's what's most important here. And if the Flyers make the playoffs, Tortorella should absolutely be in the Jack Adams consideration. Yes, it might be a little embarrassing, it might be sad at points, but Tortorella is in a lot of ways doing what needs to be done for this Flyers roster and getting him in the best position possible, and you can't really deny the results that have come from it. But I am fascinated to know your guys' thoughts down below. Are you on John Tortorella's side? Are you on Sean Couturier's side here? What are you thinking? Do you think there needs to be accountability of this Flyers roster? Do you think he went too far scratching his captain? Let me know all your thoughts down below. This is a fascinating story, and I'd love to know all your thoughts, guys. Of course, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you guys haven't already, and share the video with all the hockey, all the Flyers fans you guys know online, and also click on this card for all of my tournament content right in one playlist. And I will see you in the next one. I hope you have a great hockey day, and goodbye.